Well, welcome to the learning series of Tech Topics Thursday. And we're going to look at the new basic questions. So today we're covering sections 21.1 to 120 to 125. So the left-hand part will be the actual exam questions. The right-hand side provides a summary of the key materials, and any new question will be in bold. So we're still on section 1. So today we're going to cover 21 ITU and US Canada examinations, antenna installations, safety, and MCAB 2. So here are some of the questions that have to do with ITU, US, and Canada. So in which region of the ITU is in Canada? So Canada is in region 2. If you happen to be operating, if you're a Canadian amateur radio operator operating in the state of Florida, which frequency bands and limits do you have to follow? So the only answer here that makes any sense is because you're operating in the U.S., you have to follow the U.S. guidelines. So C is the correct answer. Those applicable to U.S. Amateur radio operators. Um, so, here's another related question. A Canadian amateur radio operator operates 7 kilometers offshore from the coast of Florida. Again, what limits do you have to follow? You're considered to be close to Florida, so you have to follow the rules of the US. And then here's another question about the ITU regions. So Australia happens to be in region 3. So C is the correct answer. So in which region is Europe and Africa located? So the correct answer is C. Europe and Africa are located in region 1. Here is a new question. A CEPT, a European Conference of Postal and Telecommunications Administrator amateur radio license allows a qualified Canadian amateur radio operator to operate while visiting any participating country. What is the minimum level of qualification does a Canadian amateur radio operator need? So in order to get this CEPT, you're going to have advanced qualifications to get that certification. And you also have to check with the country that you're going to see if they have some special requirements. Some of the European countries require you to also have Morse code if you're going to operate on HF frequencies. But to get the CEPT, you need an advanced. Here's another new question. A Canadian amateur radio operator with a CEPT amateur radio license operates in a participating country using a voice mode. What form of identification is required? So there you have a number of different options here. So the correct answer here is transmit the visitor's country prefix, followed by stroke, and then followed by your call sign. So whatever the country prefix is, flash, stroke, and then your Canadian call sign. And that's how you would identify yourself. Here's another new question. What is the minimum level qualification does a Canadian amateur radio operator need to operate in the United States? Canada and the United States have reciprocal agreements. So in this case, all you need is the basic qualification to be able to operate in the US. Here's another new question. A Canadian radio operator is operating in the United States using voice. What form of identification is required? So here it's a little bit different. Then in the international country, here you start with your Canadian call sign, followed by either portable or more mobile as appropriate, followed by the prefix of the U.S. call area being visited. So in this case, it would be call sign, Canadian call sign /P or M, P being portable, M being mobile, followed by your US prefix. And if you're in a CEPT country, it's just the opposite. You would have the country prefix first, and then followed by your Canadian call sign.
Roy,
Yes.
doesn't the United States have several prefixes?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
they would it would be probably the area prefix. So the area, I mean, US, I think is divided into 8 areas. So you would probably use one of those areas that you were in. Like I think one is like New York or Washington, and I think 7 is California, and 8 is for like the miscellaneous islands. And then they also have a letter associated with it. You'd have to look at the U.S. area that you're in to see what the U.S. call area is that you're going to be using as a prefix. So that concludes that part. Now we get into examinations. So again, here is one of these not questions. So which of the following statements is not correct? So A, an amateur accredited examiner may recover the cost of administrating an exam. That's correct. An accredited examiner must hold an amateur radio operator certificate with basic, advanced, and Morse code qualifications. That's correct. There are no fees for taking an examination for the amateur radio operator certificate at the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Office. That is also correct.
That's new.
And this is incorrect. The fee for taking an examination for an amateur radio certificate at the ISED office is $5 per qualification. That's not correct.
Do we have an ISED office in Vancouver?
Oh, of course, in Surrey.
In Surrey, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's right off the Newton station in that building there.
Off the Newton station? Yeah.
I think so. I think it's Newton. It's literally you just walk off the station into the building. I think it's Newton.
Oh, so it's at the terminus, the Canada or the transit.
Yeah.
Or is it a gateway?
Is it gateway?
I don't know. I'm assuming because there's the CRA has a couple of offices there, and
only reason why was that when I first got my accredited examiner, I had to go there for an interview, like a face-to-face interview. And I thought it was convenient that I just walk off the train station directly into the building, because there's a lot of government workers, like, I don't know, other departments in that building. So it's one of those things in Surrey, right?
I had to go too. I had to go for an interview there.
Now, I think the ISED office in Surrey doesn't hold any exams. So
it never did.
Yeah, so that office doesn't do any exams.
It's a very small office, and it's not really, you see it when you go there. It's not designed for public visits. Okay, like there's no front office or anything like that. And the reason why that particular office, unlike offices in other cities or provinces, do not offer exams is that they are focused on inspectors because of the uniqueness of Vancouver, because of the harbor, the ships. So they allocate a lot of their staff. I mean, most of their activity is radio inspecting activities. And they don't have time. And that is the reason why they've allocated so many examiners for the Vancouver area.
So here's another.
They do
Yeah.
not do exams.
Here's another one of these not questions. So which of the following statement is not correct? So A disabled candidate taking a Morse code sending test may be allowed to recite the examination text in Morse code sounds. That's allowed. That's correct. Examinations for disabled candidates may be given orally or tailored to the candidate's ability to complete the examination. That is correct. After passing the basic exam, a disabled candidate may take the other exams in any order. That is correct. So the statement that is not correct is that a disabled candidate may be exempted from portions of the amateur radio operator certificate examination. So that is not correct. You have to take the entire exam, although you may be accommodated depending on your disability on how you do the exam.
Yeah, that's what that student, with the hand operation, he tried to do that a few months ago. He says, "Well, can I still be allowed to get my call sign and then I'll write the exam when my hand feels giver?" I said, "No, you have to write the exam first." So yeah, that's an
Yeah,
example.
I mean, it'll be up to the examiner and the person, and there is actually, I think, a question coming up where the examiner may ask for some medical qualifications if for the
Oh yeah,
disabled candidate. So here is what is the fee for taking an examination for the amateur radio operator certificate administered by the accredited examiner? So the answer here is B, that there's no cost for the exam, but the examiner may charge a fee to recover the cost. Here is what is the fee for taking an amateur radio operator certificate examination at the ISED office. And again, here it's A, no charge for the qualification exams. Here's another one of these not questions. So which of the following statements is not correct? So B, a candidate who fails a written examination for lack of reading skills may be given an oral exam. That is correct. A candidate who fails a written examination due to not usually speaking English or French may be given an oral exam. That is correct. An examiner may request medical evidence from a practicing medical physician before accommodating testing. That is correct. The only thing that you're not allowed to do is to have an interpreter. So A is incorrect. A candidate with insufficient knowledge of English or French may be accompanied by an interpreter. That is not correct. Now we get into antenna installations. So again, one of these not questions. So which of these statements about the installation or modification of an antenna structure is not correct? So an amateur radio operator must follow ISED antenna sitting procedures. That's correct. In ISED expects amateur radio operators to address community concerns in a reasonable manner. That is correct. Prior to installation for which community concerns could be raised, amateur radio operators may be required to consult with their land use authority. That is correct. So the statement that's not correct is A, an amateur radio operator may erect any size antenna structure without consulting neighbors or local land use authorities. So this statement is not correct. Who has the authority over antenna installations, including antenna masts and towers? So the ultimate authority will be the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry. Here again is one of these not questions. So when may you not be required to contact land use authorities to determine public consultation requirements for an antenna system? So,
Roy, can you go back one to the
yes,
previous one?
yes,
Why does a Ministry of Innovation, Science and Industry? You mean ISED?
yeah, ISED.
Yeah, I think they mean ISED. Minister of ISED, Innovation, Sciences and Economic Development.
So
That's a
I
typo.
guess there's a typo here in this
Yeah, I
exam
think that's a
question.
typo, but you know
Yeah,
that.
it's a,
But that's gonna confuse students.
I know it's a, what do you
Confuse
call it?
people.
A mental relapse from
Yeah, I think they forgot
Canada.
to correct this change industry to economic development.
Anyways, it's clear that that's the answer, but it's not the, well written. It should be. Anyways, okay, go on. It's okay.
Unless the ministry's official title is still this, and the minister's title hasn't changed, but the department name has changed. That could be a possibility.
Anyways, that
That's
could
true.
only be
That's
the
true.
answer.
The minister's you're correct, Roy. You might be correct there. The minister's title may have changed, but the government department, ISED, has not,
Yeah.
and they're getting it confused.
So
Anyway.
Anyways, that can only be the answer anyhow, right?
Yes.
Of the four choices. Okay, go on.
Okay, so here's another one of these not questions. So when may you not be required to contact land use authorities to determine public consultation requirements for an antenna system? So when the structure is part of an amateur radio station, a radio antenna, when transmitting will only be done at low power, in a rural area, and so C is the answer when an exclusion criteria defined by the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada applies. So here's another question. If an amateur radio operator wants to install or modify an antenna system and the local land use authority has no approval process, what must the amateur radio operator do? So the correct answer is C, follow the default public consultation process outlined by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. So here's another one of these not questions. I think these sections were not really modified that much because they were trying to get away from these not questions and everything else. But these sections seem to have a lot of them, which is not an element of the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canadian public consultation process for antenna systems. So providing written notice is part of it. Addressing relevant questions and comments and concerns is part of it. Providing an opportunity for the public to respond regarding measures to address reasonable and relevant concerns, that's part of it. But you are not required to participate in public meetings on the project. So here's another one. ISED, default public consultation process for an antenna system requires proponents to address. So the answer is here. D, reasonable and relevant concerns provided in writing within a 30-day public comment period. So here is another one of these not questions. In a municipality with a public consultation process for antenna systems, when might public consultation not be required? So, so the system is excluded by the municipal process and the provisions of the client procedure circular, CPC 2003. The system is excluded by the provisions of the Client Procedure Circular CPC 2003. The system is excluded by the municipal process. So the incorrect answer is B. The system is excluded by the municipal process or the provisions of the client process procedure circular CPC 203. It has to follow both of them, not just one of them. So that's why B is the incorrect answer. The proponent of an antenna system and the stakeholder other than the general public have failed to reach an agreement. How is this final decision reached? So here, the final decision is made by Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. Ignoring other requirements regarding the installation or modification of an antenna system, what is the tallest antenna structure you could erect without public consultation? So, the correct answer here, the tallest exempted by the Land Use Authority or by the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. So you'll have to look at both of the regulations and see which one is exempted. When a land use authority or a municipality has established a public consultation process for antenna systems, who determines how public consultations take place? So since there is a process, it's either the municipality or the local land use authority that you have to follow because they have a public consultation process. So that completes the antenna installations. It's a little bit tricky because the municipality or land use authority may have some guidelines on antennas, may have some guidelines on public consultation for antenna systems, and if they don't, then it falls back to ISED. However, ISED has also the final authority and can overrule some of the municipalities and land use authorities. Remember, this applies to all antennas for commercial purposes and amateur radio. It just doesn't apply for amateur radio by itself.
Correct.
So
But also the municipality and the land use authorities, I won't call it guidelines. There are more biases.
Yes, like for
Okay.
example,
Realistically, they're biases because I don't think they have guidelines.
yeah, they might have some bylaws. Like for example, if you live in a strata corporation, they
Well,
might
that's
have
different. Yeah,
but they might have a bylaw saying no antennas.
Well, that's yeah.
So that would be your land use authority, would be the strata corporation in this case. So the best thing is to check with all the levels of various levels of government to see what the requirements are. So now we get into safety. So
Yay.
what organization has published safety guidelines for the maximum limits of RF energy near a human body? In this case, it happens to be Health Canada. So these are the Health Canada guidelines. And they publish a guideline called Safety Code 6. And so what is the purpose of Safety Code 6? It gives RF exposure limits for the human body. According to Safety Code 6, what frequencies cause the greatest risk for RF energy? So it tends to be the HF and UHF regions that causes the greatest risk, and that's from 48 megahertz to 300 megahertz. Remember that the curve is shaped like a U, and the bottom part of the U is the greatest risk. why is the limit of exposure to RF the lowest in the range of the frequency range 48 megahertz to 300 megahertz according to safety code 6? Because the human body absorbs RF energy the most in this range. Couple more questions. According to safety code 6, what is the maximum safe power output to the antenna of a handheld VHF or UHF radio? So what you have to remember is safety code 6 only deals with RF exposure to the human body. It doesn't deal with where the RF source comes from. So the correct answer is A, it's not specified. When specifying maximum levels of exposure to RF fields, what are the two basic situations does safety code 6 cover? So when you look at it, there it covers both controlled and uncontrolled environments. So the correct answer is C. So an uncontrolled environment would be one where the general public is exposed to RF energy, and the controlled environment would be one where there would be a fence and signs around an antenna that prevents people from getting into that environment. So it's controlled. Here is a new question. Apart from energy absorption, and especially below 10 megahertz, what is the second established adverse health effect in safety code 6? So the first effect is that RF energy causes heat and causes your body to heat up. The second effect is C, nerve stimulation, especially below 10 megahertz. So here is one of these questions, one of these not questions. Which statement is not correct? So safety code 6 uses different units for magnetic field strength and electric field strength. That is correct. Safety code 6 specifies lower exposure limits for the general public in uncontrolled areas than for controlled areas. That is correct. Antenna gain, distance, and transmitter power and frequency all influence exposure to radio energy. That is correct. So the thing that's not correct is handheld transmitters are excluded from safety code 6 requirements. So C is the wrong answer. Safety code 6 sets limits for RF exposure for radio transmitters. What type of transmitters are exempt from regulations? So the way the code is written is no transmitters are exempt from the regulations. So here's another one of these not statements. Which of these statements about safety code 6 is not correct? So A, safety code 6 sets limits for allowable rates at which RF energy is absorbed into the body, known as the specific absorption rate, or SAR. That's correct. Safety code 6 sets limits for contact currents that could be drawn from ungrounded or poorly grounded objects. This is typically from low frequency items like 60 hertz and less. So that is correct. Safety code 6 sets limits for induced currents, electrical field strengths, and magnetic field strengths for electromagnetic radiation. That's correct. Depending on the frequency and how it's expressed, the limit could be in terms of induced current, it could be electrical field strength, or it could be magnetic field strength, or a combination of power. So B is not correct. Safety code 6 sets limits in terms of power levels fed to antennas. Remember, safety code 6 is about exposure to you, not about what generates the RF signal or the power. So that completes the section about RF safety. There is another section about general safety, which will come up in, I believe, in section 2 or section 3. So now we have this concept of immunity, or MCAP, and or electromagnetic compatibility. So what it assumes is that if you have some sort of device like a telephone or a stereo system or some sort of music equipment or a garage door opener, it should be designed so it's immune to a certain level of RF exposure. So here are some examples. So your neighbor's stereo system malfunctions when you're transmitting. What provision of MCAP2 deems that the stereo system's lack of immunity is the cause? So if you go over to if you measure the field strength of your emissions over at your neighbor's premises and it's below the specified immunity criteria, although your neighbor is not going to be happy, you're not responsible for that problem because it's below the immunity criteria for that stereo system. So that means the stereo system is malfunctioning. It's not, you are not responsible for that emission causing the effect of the malfunction. So here's another example. Your neighbor's television receiver malfunctions when you are transmitting. What provision of the MCAP bulletin deems your transmission is the cause? So in this one here, it was for the lack of immunity. So here you are the cause. So what happens here is just the opposite. The field strength of your emissions on your neighbor's premises is above the immunity criteria. So in this case, you are responsible for the malfunction because you're above the immunity criteria. Here is a new question. When determining the field strength criteria per the bulletin, what type of equipment describes devices often used in home entertainment systems, but not strictly speaking radio apparatus? So it's defined as associated equipment. So home entertainment systems falls under associated equipment. Here's another new question. Your neighbor complains that your transmissions interfere with their garage door opener. When determining the acceptable feed strength criterion for the MCAP bulletin, what type of equipment is it? The garage door opener. So in this case, because it involves RF and you need RF to open up the garage door opener, it falls under A, which is radio sensitive equipment. And that concludes the sections on MCAP. So each one of these equipments has different immunity levels, and you don't need to know what the levels are for the exam, but these all have different levels. Broadcast equipment does not have an immunity level because it's emitting RF energy all the time. So that concludes section 1. So next week, we're going to look at section 2, operations procedures. So I hope to cover all 9 sections next week, but divided into 2, 1 to 5, and then 6 to 9, so that we get through some of these sections a little bit faster. So we'll see how it goes. So let me stop the recording.